Hey everybody, Matter here. Welcome to part 11 of my Chaos Head Noah Let's Play. So the last episode, I was hoping to find out some more information about the fifth murder of the doctor that Takumi was going to, but unfortunately we didn't really get much information from there. Just little bits and pieces like learning that Bon, the detective, he got his information about this whole GE rates thing from some random woman who works at like a credit union or something like that. And she seems to have all this information about the inner workings of the world and this political group that might be behind it. Something like that. It seems like some sort of maybe political conspiracy. Not too sure about that. The thing that was at the end with Takumi getting a call from the same person who called him before and played, I believe it's like You May Pass or You Shall Pass. And then it cut to Yua's classroom where like all the students are like freaking out, foaming at the mouth. She gets a call. There's a mention about her sister. And then the sky goes white. So I don't know what the heck is going on there, but we'll see if we get any answers in this episode. Without further ado, let's get back into it and see what happens next. Chapter 6, Noah. If it were a day like any other, getting released from a lengthy meeting should have put Bon Yasuji in a good mood. However, today was not a normal day. The detective removed himself from his peers, moved to the nearest window, and attempted irritably to call his junior. Maybe, what's his name, Sua? Maybe he's behind it somehow. Maybe he's a plant or something. Sua, his partner, had not shown up to today's meeting. Oh, don't tell me he's gonna be the next victim. I get wanting to play hooky on this, but did you really have to leave me to go it alone? Darn kid, Bon thought to himself. Sua seems like a good kid. I hope he's not, like, secretly working for this, Nozomi group, or hopefully he's not dead. At first glance, Sua may have appeared lighthearted, but in actuality, he was quite the diligent man and took his job very seriously. With this being Bon's opinion of him, what had happened today was quite the shock. He had attempted to call him several times, but it always went to voicemail. Ever since he had heard a fairly unsettling story from Momose 2 days prior, Bon had been faced with a constant feeling of uneasiness. And today, only more troubles had been added to the pile. There was the incident with Sua, but that was not all. When Bon was reporting about the GE rate earlier this morning, he was immediately shot down by Matsunaga. We don't have time for crackpot theories, his superior said. Could you not add to the pile, kid? I've had enough for 1 week. Bon waved his fan at his face repeatedly and let out a small sigh. And right when he did, the call connected and he heard the voice of his junior on the other end. The reception was extremely poor. Which part of the countryside did Sua lose himself in? Bon thought, scratching his head. Oh. Is that interrogating suspects? As Bond shouted into the receiver, Sua's voice disappeared on the other end, replaced by a continuous rustling sound. The way Sua acted on his own without getting permission was not something that was worthy of praise. However, Bon could not help but smile wryly to himself, as he too was taking unauthorized actions even now. He considered that perhaps he was a bad influence on his junior. The color in Bon's eyes shifted. Oh, shit, an earthquake? Right at that moment, the area below Bond's feet began to shake, because they were talking about, like, something... What did that woman say? She says something like, to get those rates or something, you'd have to have basically, like, a volcano would have to erupt in Shibuya. The shaking gradually increased in intensity. It was hard to even stand up straight. Unable to maintain his balance for any longer, Bond got down low to the floor. The other detectives, who at first seemed to be underestimating the seriousness of the situation, all quickly moved under their tables. The clock fixed to the wall, the paper cups and pens atop the tables, the projection equipment. They all crashed to the floor one by one. I've only experienced an earthquake one time, and it was a very low-grade one, but it was scary. So I can imagine. I can't imagine. And the thing is, like, part of me would love to... maybe not live in Japan, but... I would still love to visit, but I am paranoid about, like, because they are susceptible to earthquakes, and big ones at that. The two whiteboards standing side by side near the podium fell to the ground as well. It's like being stuck in an insane turbulence. That was how it felt to Bond. It felt like the ground was disappearing beneath him. His entire body was being swung left and right by the shaking. It seemed to have a seismic intensity of around 5 or 6. Has the Great Kanto earthquake finally arrived? Of all times for it to hit, it hits now? Immediately after thinking that, a fierce pain shot through Bond, causing him to groan in pain. It felt as if he had taken a violent blow to the head. But he had not been physically struck by anyone. It was simply a severe headache. Ooh, maybe he just got hit with the ability to... whatever the everyone else is able to do, like reach into another world and, like, have their delusions become reality. Maybe he just got a power. Something unlocked in him. Suddenly, a scream echoed throughout the conference room. Gritting his teeth, Bond looked up to see one of the detectives gripping his head as he writhed in agony. But this is like what was happening to the students in the classroom the last episode. Maybe this is when the sky's turning white from, like, their perspective. This is the moment. And then, like a lifeless doll, he fell to the ground with a thump. Most of the other detectives were gripping their heads as well, their faces contorted in pain. What was this headache that bore no resemblance to any he'd experienced before? Whether it was connected to the earthquake, there was no way for Bond to know. Eventually, the shaking gradually subsided. With his vision blurred, Bond looked out the window. Oh, yep, there it is. Everything was covered in a milky white light. A light so dazzling, Bond could no longer keep his eyes open. I feel like this game, I say, what the hell is going on, like, 6 times an episode. Okay, so an earthquake happened all over, obviously. As I opened my eyes, I felt a sharp pain enough to crack my skull open. I found myself slumped over in the middle of my room. I tried to get up, but the pain in my head suddenly shot to the rest of my body, and I nearly fainted from the agony. I let out a pain groan. Is that the thing with the phone? Did that somehow set this off? Like, the timing seems a little bit too suspect. I mean, if this whole thing with the Nozomi group or whatever, like, they're able to control people's senses, to give them headaches and stuff, but the whole thing with the earthquake, like, maybe it's related to the GE rating, the earthquake with the sky, what the heck is going on? After 5 full minutes of pure writhing torture, the pain receded slightly, and I managed to stand up by using the leg of my bed to support myself. I wiped off the cold sweat on my forehead with my hand. My room was completely devastated. It was as if a tornado had ripped through it. All my waifus lined up on the shelf had toppled over, and some had even fallen off the shelf entirely. The worst tragedy of all. The bed was now sitting at an angle, and the piles of Erogaine packages had crumbled to the floor and scattered everywhere. What the hell had happened? If I remembered correctly, there had been a phone call that had played the melody of You May Pass before the transitioning into something like an ambulance siren. It was exactly the same as last time. Except it certainly didn't have that effect. That's right. Right when the buzzer had sounded, I had heard the ground roar, and immediately after that, my whole body had felt like it was boiling and melting. And then I couldn't remember a damn thing. It was all completely blank. Oh God. Was it an EM wave attack from Shogun? What if Shogun was capable of something similar to what was in the patent I'd found? Just the thought alone sent a chill down my spine. While trying my best to endure my headache, I looked up at the ceiling. Of course, there wasn't anything to see up there. But if he was reading my mind, he'd have to be using a satellite that would be in orbit way up there.
いくらなんでもそんなはずないよ。
But considering what Sena had told me before, that patent system could already be in use. Maybe it was in use, and a few people were already abusing it. And maybe Shogun was among them. No, there was no way. It was way too far-fetched. There was no way an old fart like him with one foot in the grave would have private access to a satellite. Unless he was one of the key persons behind a top-secret black project sanctioned by the government. You know, the more he's talking like these conspiracy theories, the more I'm like, we see the other, like, the behind-the-scenes stuff happen. Like, he might be on the right path, actually. It'd be funny if he was right about everything. Scaring myself with my own delusions wasn't helping anything. Since something had actually happened, I decided to look up what the hell it was online. Still fighting my headache, I crawled toward my computer. Oh, is the internet all out? Oh, shit. You might as well just die right now. The computer should have still been on. The monitor should have been displaying a wallpaper with serotonin on it, but it was pitch black. I hadn't set it up to automatically go into sleep mode, so it wouldn't make any sense for it to do that. I was feeling dizzy. It was as if I'd had no strength left in my body. Even standing up took almost everything I had. Gritting my teeth, I attempted to move the mouse around. No response. Next, I tried to press the power button. Oh, okay. After a second, the hard disk started emitting its typical scratching noise. I mean, the computer might boot up, but it might not have access to the internet. I sank down in my chair. As I was waiting for my PC to boot, I frantically grabbed my phone, which was still on the desk. I checked the time.
13時
Before I'd gotten that phone call, what time had it been back when I was browsing the ISA stuff on that channel? When I tried using my brain, the stabbing pain coursing through it got even worse. Think, the time, remember the time. It couldn't have been. Yeah, it hadn't been noon yet. Which meant...
1時間以上も気絶してた
Or maybe I had been sleepwalking, and I ended up wandering off somewhere else for an hour?
僕は無遊病じゃない
I shook my head violently, trying to stop thinking about things that would make me sink back into negative bullshit. As I did so, my vision wobbled from the pain still hammering in my head. It was like a lump of lead was sitting in the middle of my skull. And when I looked at my PC monitor, I saw... Oh yeah, shit.
おい、マジで
No way, the hard disk data was corrupted?
嘘だそんなのありえないあっちゃダメだそんなことになったら全てが終わる
It was where I stored my giga-sized collection of R18 Moe pics, my Eroge save data, all my bookmarks for sites I browsed daily, my minimum attendance chart, and the thing I treasured the most, my ESO save data. No! You're telling me everything is gone? I wanted to cry out in frustration. I wanted to smash my keyboard in anger. I wanted to kick the wall with everything I had. Before I did anything, though, I needed to check if I could restore it. But my whole body was still heavy, and my headache refused to go away. All I could do was bite my lip and sink deeper into my chair. I think we've all had that moment of panic when, like, something happens to our computer. We think we've lost everything. It was over. My life was over. Losing my ESO data meant I had no reason left to live. Nothing mattered anymore. It had all burned away. Just kill me. With an angelic smile on her face, Seroton gently called for me from atop my desk. By server, you mean the dev server? Oh, you're right. I was so dizzy and confused I'd forgotten even the basics. It felt like I'd finally found a ray of hope shining through the endless despair. I knew I could depend on my waifu. I'd still have to give up on my treasured pics and MP3s that I hadn't backed up, though. I needed to start reformatting the OS as quickly as possible. And I wanted to see with my own 2 eyes that my ESO data was safe. Though in order to do that, the headache that was still torturing me had to stop. Unfortunately for me, the pain didn't feel like it would be going anywhere anytime soon. There was rarely ever a moment in where the screens of Shibuya Station were not colored with advertisements, video clips, or music videos from the latest popular artists. And yet, currently, the screens were instead displaying a female anchor with a grave expression on her face. It was an ongoing special TV broadcast. Sensational words decorated the top left of the screen. SI5 earthquake in Shibuya, over 200 casualties. Earthquakes were not particularly unexpected in Japan. Tokyo metropolitan area had already fallen victim to several seismic intensity 5 earthquakes over the years. However, as the media gathered more and more information about the incident, the sheer number of casualties made it clear that this was no ordinary earthquake. It was especially peculiar when compared to the 2005 earthquake, also seismic intensity 5, where no fatalities had been reported. Moreover, the epicenter was Shibuya, a city which was already the center of attention in Japan due to the NewGen incidents. What I've learned from playing these visual novels is don't live in Shibuya, apparently, or Tokyo. Lots of bad things tend to happen there. There had already been an earthquake in Shibuya approximately 3 months prior. It was a seismic intensity 3 quake and 8 people had died. Maybe Shibuya's cursed. That was what the people observing the breaking news about the latest earthquake were thinking, even if they weren't saying it aloud. In any case, each station had started their special broadcast right when the earthquake hit. Information was having trouble circulating, and the total death count was still unclear. Nonetheless, the female anchor continued to report. Reading from a stack of papers, she declared, "The Fire and Disaster Management Agency has confirmed 31 deaths, and that number is expected to rise as they continue to aid those affected. The causes of death remain unknown, but Furthermore, various reports described a mysterious white light appearing immediately after the earthquake had hit. According to these reports, the light had been accompanied by a massive shockwave, and it had turned the sky completely white. The cameras spread across Shibuya's Scramble Crossing had caught the aforementioned light on tape, and after the earthquake ended, nothing but pure white footage was displayed on loop on the jumbotrons located there. The discoloration that had appeared alongside the earthquake had not simply been a dull white, however. It had been utterly blinding. Shibuya had been momentarily enveloped in light, the sheer glare forcing each and every resident's eyes shut. If this were an era of war, the people would have undoubtedly believed it to have come from a nuclear weapon. As a matter of fact, there were some who claimed to have spotted a white mushroom cloud floating a few hundred meters above Shibuya, though it was quick to vanish. No one knew what the origin of the light was, nor if it was connected to the earthquake. And then, just as mysteriously as its arrival, the white sky had returned to its original color in less than an hour, and now a dull light blue lay above the people of Shibuya. The asphalt of Dokanzaka was very slightly cracked, its damage only millimeters wide. And the multi-tenant buildings, together with many other structures along Center-gai, had all grown small crevices across their walls. Reformatting of my OS had taken nearly 2 hours to finish, and yet my headache still hadn't gone away. I'd even lost consciousness a few times from the pain. I'd passed out on my keyboard from exhaustion before, but today was the first time I'd literally passed out. On the plus side, the pain was way more bearable now than it had been 2 hours ago. I wet my throat with some cola, and then summoning all my energy, stood up. Fixed my broken bed and made it level again, then cleaned my floor to the extent that I'd be able to walk around. It took a lot of effort to do because of how weak I was feeling, but it had to be done. I wouldn't have been able to leave my own room otherwise. I love how he cleans it just enough to, he can walk around. If Shogun were to attack again, not that I actually knew if it was him this time, I would have been trapped and unable to escape. In other words, I'd be completely fucked. I had to secure an escape route, or else. Once I'd finished reformatting my OS and cleaning my room, I went straight to the PC, installed ESO, and tried logging into Baselard.
Yatta. ナイトハルトは消えてない。装備とかも全部無事だ。よかった。よかった。
I was so moved I tried to get up and pump my fist in the air, but even that took too much energy, so I gave up halfway through. I couldn't have been more happy to see my other self alive and well. I'd thought he was gone forever. Okay, time for the next step. Well, it was definitely a huge load off my shoulders. I still wanted to try and figure out exactly what had even happened. Not to mention demand compensation and a formal apology. It seemed like an earthquake, but there were way too many things that didn't add up if that were true. I looked for Grim inside Baselard, but he was nowhere to be found. I went to check the chat room, but since I'd lost my bookmarks, I had trouble finding it. When I eventually did, though, I discovered Grim wasn't there either. Of all times for him to have gone AWOL, why now? With no options left, I had no choice but to head straight to Taboo itself. On it, I found the following article: over 200 casualties in Shibuya. So, there really had been an earthquake. It had been a seismic intensity 5 quake, and loads of people had died. Casualties were currently set at 200, but the article stated the number may go up even beyond that. There were also reports of Shibuya's sky turning pure white for a short period of time, as well as a giant mushroom cloud, though no one knew if either of those were connected to the earthquake. The earthquake was also being discussed on @channel, with people posting things like more Shibuya stuff or Shibuya is over or whatever else. There was also a video uploaded on there showing footage of Scramble Crossing that had been taken from its various surveillance cameras.
これ、地震だけじゃないよね。
When it happened, I had been hit with a terrible headache, and it wasn't just your normal headache. It felt like my head was boiling. And even now, almost 2 hours later, I was still experiencing throbbing pain and fatigue.
電子レンジに閉じ込められたら、あんな風になるかもしれない。
If I'd thought about it that way, my delusion that Shogun was going after me with EN wave attacks might not have been so far-fetched. Right at that moment, I heard a familiar sound coming from my PC. It was the notification tone that played whenever someone entered the chat room. Grim might have joined. I wanted to get the full story of what had happened, so I opened up the chat room. I bet it's Shogun. Yep. Except it's Shogun. Is it spelled differently? Was it always spelled Shogun? The moment I saw that name, a shriek escaped my mouth. What was with this timing? Could he actually read my mind after all? The hand I was using to hold the mouse was trembling. My entire body was frozen in fear, overriding even my headache. Just looking at Shogun's name made me feel sick, but I couldn't look away. I wanted to close the chat room, but I was in such a state of shock, my mind and body felt like they had been ripped apart. I tried desperately to move the mouse, but my body simply refused to listen to me. I felt chills on the nape of my neck. I was being watched. God's gaze. Or maybe it wasn't God. Maybe it was Shogun's gaze being shot down from an orbiting satellite. Ugh, just leave me alone. I wanted to run away. But where would I run? It didn't matter where I went. Even if I went to the very edges of Japan, he'd still catch me. It's been a long time. That was the first thing Shogun had said to me. Yeah, so there it's spelled S-H-O-G-U-N, there it's Shogun. He'd said it like it was just casually saying hello to a friend he hadn't seen in a while. But I knew for a fact I'd never, ever considered this guy a friend. My teeth sank into my lip as I stared at the words written across the monitor. However, instead of making me freeze out of fear, the message from Shogun instead sent me grabbing for my phone. It was past 3 p.m. At this hour, classes were probably still in session, but surely my situation wasn't hopeless. If Rimi was here, she could do something. That's what I wanted to believe. I went to my address book, although it wasn't much of a book considering how empty it was, and called Rimi's phone number.
助けて、リミ。
Do you hate me?
リミ、早く。出て。
It was hard to breathe. I couldn't think straight. Rimi wasn't picking up. There was no voice on the other end, only the monotonous dialing sound repeating endlessly. Why? Whenever I'm in trouble, you're always there for me. So why aren't you answering? I have a present for you. A present? You're gonna send me some more disgusting shit? And this time you're gonna blame me for it. You're gonna pin me as the NewGen culprit. No, anything but that. It's not me. I'm not the culprit. I felt like a fish that had been ripped out of the water. I was losing oxygen. My mind was going fuzzy. My only ray of hope left was Rimi. I grasped my phone tighter and tighter, praying with all my might to the other end of the call. She picked up.
助けて。
留守番電話サービスにおつなぎします。
I hope it pleases you. Voicemail? I couldn't be. I mean, when you think about it, right? Like, if she's in class, she wouldn't be able to answer her phone. Discouraged, I hung up the phone. I wrapped my arms around myself. You know what? I'm gonna give him a bit of a break. Let's give him a positive one, even though there's nothing positive happening right now. Before I knew it, my body had started trembling. I was more afraid of Shogun than I thought I was. But why wouldn't I be? He was a homicidal maniac posing as a handicapped person, and he'd already committed 5 unspeakable crimes. And I was the next one in his sights.
助けてよ。
Rimi, it was as if my prayers had been answered, like the cries of my heart had been heard. Rimi really did always appear whenever I was in trouble. She opened the door and leapt into my room.
リミ、助けて。
Rimi looked straight at me, then quickly examined our surroundings. Immediately realizing the source of terror was my PC, she began typing on the keyboard with an angry expression. Shut your mouth, stupid! Leave Taku alone or I'll kick your butt. I love for her that's being ruthless. Rimi looked back at me and smiled gently. Was that really how it worked? Rimi was only that reckless because she didn't know much about the internet. Being that blunt would only make the other person madder. And here the other person was Shogun. As I stared at the monitor with bated breath, Shogun sent yet another message. You're dead. I don't know if he's talking to me or if he's talking to Rimi. Like, somehow knowing that that's not... Obviously, that's not me typing. The room went silent. What the hell? Good job, Rimi. I knew it. It really had pissed him off. The tone of his last message was very clearly different. She's like, whoopsie.
まさかここに直接押しかけてくるなんてことはないって。それよりタク、大丈夫だった？ごめんね、電話くれたでしょ。ちょうどこっちに向かってるところだったから出られなかった。さっきの地震の後、タクが心配になってここまで全力疾走してきたんだ。来てよかった。
While I was listening to Rimi's voice, I couldn't take my eyes off the monitor. His message had left me deeply unsettled. You're dead.
なんてこと。
私が来たから、もう平気だよ。何の心配もないから。
なんてことしてくれたんだよ。殺される。あいつに殺される。早く逃げないと。
落ち着いて。殺されなんてしないよ。タクの考えすぎ。
Oh, why did her eyes go all... They seemed like the lifelike just went out of them. Suddenly, Rimi went silent. Her eyebrows furrowed and she looked up at the ceiling.
どうしたの？
その目。
Oh, shit.
誰の目？
Her voice was a soft murmur. Suddenly, Rimi's face contorted and she grabbed at her head with both hands.
頭、急に痛くなってきた。痛い。そう。
Unable to endure the pain anymore, Rimi fell to the floor. She was shaking her head madly.
なんで急に。
Don't tell me. My gaze shot toward the ceiling. No, not the ceiling. Toward the sky, beyond the ceiling. toward an artificial satellite that might or might not exist. Was Shogun attacking? Hey, maybe Takumi, you know, she went to all this effort to come see you. Maybe go and, like, comfort her? Plip. A drop of blood fell from Rimi's nose. Suddenly her half moans, half screams ceased. Rimi's body shook violently as she staggered and then dropped to the floor headfirst. God damn. Is this a delusion? Is this actually happening? It's not all wavy. Oh my god.
Rimi.
There was no answer. She didn't even twitch. He'd killed her using a satellite, using EM waves. Shogun had killed Rimi. I refuse to believe this is happening. No. How? It had been so quiet. He'd killed Rimi with neither sound nor smell, without even a hint of his presence. It'd been way too quiet, but that only made it more terrifying. There was no escape. I kneeled to the floor and shook Rimi's shoulder.
ねえ、起きてよ。リミ。
There was no escape. No matter where I went on Earth, there'd be no escape.
僕を置いていかないでよ。
Wherever I would try to flee, Shogun would be able to attack from high above in the sky.
こんなの妄想に決まってる。
Okay. Yeah, that didn't happen. When I returned to my senses, I was still in front of the motor. I have to remember, just because it's not all wavy, it doesn't mean that that's, like, it's actually happening. Oh, the game's really good at messing with my head, making me be like I'm him. You know, what's real, what's fake, like, what's actually happening, what's a delusion. The answer Rimi had written earlier had vanished. And Shogun's "you're dead" had too. I looked back toward the rest of my room, and Rimi's body was nowhere to be found. I hope this isn't like he talks about how, like, sometimes he can make things reality. Hopefully he's not gonna, like, predict her death. I felt relieved Rimi wasn't actually dead, but I was disappointed she hadn't shown up. Why? Why wasn't she here yet? I was absolutely terrified. I needed her now more than ever. It's just sad, like, he doesn't treat her like a person. He's basically just using her to, I don't know, like, just as a crutch. Shogun had already left the chat room. All that remained were those 4 lines. I didn't want to see any of it, so I hurriedly closed the chat room while Shogun wasn't in it. My body was still trembling. Shogun was trying to provoke me. Was it fun fucking with me like this? Had I been chosen as the next victim and this was a means to that end? Or was I just the perfect person to pin his crimes on?
誰か助けてよ。
I stared at the post-awakening version Seraton as if I were clinging to my only refuge.
一人は怖いんだ。
I didn't want to be alone. I wanted someone to be by my side. I wanted someone to protect me.
そうだ、学校だ。学校へ行けば。
Rimi will be there. I couldn't bear staying here alone with my spiraling anxiety. I took off my worn-out sweatshirt that I usually wore around the house, threw on my uniform, and left my base. Once I was hit with the cold air of outside, my headache ever so slightly subsided. The city had a more restless atmosphere to it than usual, probably due to the earthquake from earlier. I didn't know that for sure, though. In the distance, the sound of sirens continued to echo endlessly, but I wasn't sure if they were from ambulances or fire trucks. It could have been both. I don't know if I've mentioned this, but something that I really find that this game nails is, like, the atmosphere of just, like, the background noises. I know with YouTube I have to, like, cut out a lot of, like, basically all the background music, but there actually isn't, especially considering to, like, other VNs I play where there's music playing almost all the time. And I feel like it just gives it a very lonely, realistic atmosphere, especially in situations like this where it's like you could just hear the sirens in the background. It just gives, like, a very spooky, tense atmosphere, like shit is going down. And like the sounds of when he's in his base, and it's just the sound of like the PC, like the buzzing sound of it. It just makes it sound so much more realistic. Yamate Dori, which was 1 block away from me, was completely jammed. Traffic was bumper to bumper. There was multiple visible accidents, most head-on, and the cars involved had simply been left abandoned on the road, their drivers nowhere to be found. Those abandoned cars were the cause of this traffic jam. The other drivers were honking their horns like crazy. As I was wandering the streets to get to school, I saw a dog crossing the road, barking. It was a chihuahua sprinting at full speed, dragging its leash behind its small body. Its eyes were bloodshot, and a large amount of drool was dripping from its open mouth. It had probably gotten separated from its owner. As I absent-mindedly watched it get farther and farther away, I tripped on something and nearly fell over. The asphalt was cracked, and one section of the road was ever so slightly lower than the rest. It had most likely come from the earthquake. Stopping right there, I looked up at the sky. There were a few white clouds drifting calmly across the dull light blue. Just after the earthquake had hit, something similar to an aurora had formed in the sky and tainted it pure white, but the traces of it had already disappeared. This isn't right. This isn't Shibuya. I couldn't calm down in the slightest. Not just because of the earthquake, and not because of the headache either. It wasn't just those, but a certain urge that was threatening to overtake me. For some reason, walking around like this made me feel like I wanted to kill someone. Oh, okay. By the time I got to the school gate, the anxiety and sense of dread I'd been feeling were increasing by the second. I had the chills, my body wouldn't stop shivering, and my headache was coming back. When I looked closely, I noticed a group of students formed around the third-year building. I looked for Rimi within them. For some odd reason, everyone was looking toward the top of the building, and even those who weren't soon followed suit. Almost like a bunch of oh no, don't tell me there's going to be another, like, group dive or something. Someone's up there?
Oh, Taku!
Misumi-kun rushed over to me. I should ask him where Rimi was. Hopefully she's not up there. I imagine Misumi would be freaking out more if she was, like, on the roof.
お前、今日学校来てたんだな。いや、そんなの今はどうでもいいから。
He looked gravely serious and his face was pale. Seeing Misumi-kun like this was very unusual. What the hell was going on?
マジで。やばいよな。
Maybe something did happen to Rimi. Things are bad. What did that mean? What was bad?
病気だったんだろ。
She was sick, right?
精神病のことがバレて余計におかしくなっちゃったらしいぜ。
Oh, it's Ayase.
さっき飛べるとか言ってたぜ。やべえよ。やばすぎる。俺、人が死ぬとこマジで見てんだけど。人黒すぎて最高だぜ。早く落ちてこねえかな。
I could hear things like that coming from everywhere around me. Don't tell me. I had a bad feeling about this. Fearfully following the gazes of the other students, I looked up at the school building. Yep. On the edge of the rooftop stood a single girl. In her hand, just like during the concert, was a D-sword, with a pose emblematic of praying to God in the heavens above. On the edge of the roof stood Kishimoto Ayase. Man, this one feels like it's really escalating. Like, this is wild.
その体は写真の影に潜む。目には映らない存在。
Kishimoto Ayase felt the wind blowing. The cold wind brought with it a faint hint of winter. Her expression undulated with pain, huge drops of sweat forming on her face as she faced the chilled gales.
離れようとも離れようとも冷めぬ悪夢は。
The Sume Academy rooftop was enclosed by a 2-meter-high wire fence. Ayase was standing on the other side of it, occupying a space of only around 30 centimeters. 10 minutes had passed since she had first started standing there. One more step and she would fall from the roof of the 4-story school building. Many students were gathered below Ayase, watching her with bated breath.
やがて剣となりてこの身を切り裂くのだろう。
Although the police and emergency services had already been contacted, they had yet to arrive, likely due to the earthquake that had only hit a few hours prior. The teachers were running around in a panic, scrambling to get gym mats ready in case of the worst possible outcome.
無関心という名の盾で戦火を免れる人々。
And why does the sky look so red to her? Like, is that how she's seeing the sky? And yet Ayase stood completely still, unperturbed by the ruckus below, or rather, she deliberately cut herself off from the rest of the world that lay beneath her. As she gazed up to the sky, Ayase closed her eyes, her pose emulative of that of a maiden praying to the heavens. Due to her good sense of balance, the wind did not manage to sway her slender body, a fact made all the more impressive by her grasping a sword as long as she was tall.
神聖なる戦場の敵は心の内の悪意なるもの。
The sword, her D sword, was blinking with a pale blue light. As if synchronized with it, Ayase's labored breathing continued, and then she began to murmur once more.
悪意は時として意志を持ち、そしてその姿を表す。
The verse as she unfolded through her murmur soon vanished into the wind. Ayase opened her eyes and gazed at the crimson sky spreading over the buildings of Shibuya.
この世界は悪意の妄想に満ち溢れている。みんな他人の不幸が大好き。目を閉じても耳を塞いでもダメ。昔からずっと私のそばを離れてくれないわ。
As she breathed the soliloquy into the air, Ayase pulled her gigantic sword to her chest and gently embraced it with both arms. Curiously, the sharp sword did not leave a single injury on her.
帰りたかった。大いなる意志が住むもう一つの世界に。そのために心を切り刻んで全部受け入れたわ。混沌の器としての夢を。
Ayase's face twisted in sorrow. Tears quietly spilled from her eyes. Droplets, flowing voicelessly, were all swiftly carried away by the wind.
だけどグラジオールの態度が
I don't know what the heck she's talking about. What it was, like Chunibyo shit, as Taku would say.
もう時間がないのに見つからない。見つからないのよ。天国の扉も賢者も導き手も七つの神罰も黒騎士の伝説は本当なの？
My gosh, this is a bit of an info dump. Heaven's Gate, Black Knights, Greater Will.
歌はもうたくさん歌ったわ。それで足りないって言うならね。大いなる意志よ。
Ayase spread her arms out far and wide, as if trying to embrace the sky itself, as if trying to show her presence to God on high.
私は飛ぶわ。
The pale blue pulsation of her sword intensified. Ayase closed her eyes once more, and in that moment a final tear dropped from the corner. She's not gonna die right now. We barely know anything about this girl. What the heck?
お願い。この器は
Maybe something will happen.
差し出すから。
Maybe, like, Takumi will be able to manipulate the world and save her somehow.
魂を連れて行って。
And then, without a moment's hesitation, the girl, with nothing there to support her, took a step forward.
帰るべき場所へ。
She felt the cold caressing her cheek. Her gaze fell to the earth. Okay, there's a... Oh, okay, she's just gonna disappear into another world? Looming closer as she fell was a door, a gate, and on the other side of it was the sky Ayase desired. Is she actually gonna, like, fall into it and disappear and we're gonna be like, what happened to her? Or is she just gonna go splat? I'm assuming she's just gonna disappear. Or maybe not. I don't know. We'll see from his point of view. I couldn't do anything but watch it unfold. After Ayase spread her arms out, she slowly stepped into the thin air as if taking a step down onto a non-existent staircase. Screams began to build among the spectators, coalescing into a gigantic roar. With nothing left to support her, Ayase, like a puppet whose strings had been cut, fell headfirst toward the ground. Everything appeared to be in slow motion. Ayase's body was going to crash to the ground. Her descent was incredibly slow, but she was definitely falling. She was gonna die. Ayase was gonna die. I couldn't do anything to stop it. I couldn't save someone falling from that high. And there was nothing but concrete below her. It would crush all her bones, rupture all her organs, and make her dark blood and gray matter squirt out all over the ground. If only there was a flower bed or something. If only there was something soft below her. If there was, maybe it could save her. I didn't want to see someone die. As I went to close my eyes, for an ephemeral moment, I felt chills on the nape of my neck. I looked behind me, but not a soul was standing there. Everyone was either looking down, averting their eyes, or looking up at her. Whose eyes are those eyes? Oh! Okay. A sound shook the air, the sound of a person crashing down. It was the first time I'd ever heard that sound, but it had a lot less impact than I was expecting. Next to me stood Mizumi-kun, his eyes wide as dinner plates. I expected his gaze to be tainted by dread, but the way he stared at the place Ayase had fallen was one of surprise, not horror. And it wasn't just Mizumi-kun that was like that. Did she just, like, land perfectly and she's fine? All of the spectators looked like they had no idea what was going on. They were all at a loss for words. Yeah, I bet you assholes feel pretty bad for saying that you were hoping you'd see her splatter. So gross. Like, I know there's people out there who watch videos like I can't watch that kind of shit. I can't watch people die or get hurt. But just, yeah, people who seek out videos like that of people dying or like want to see people like jump or like do that. I don't get it. I don't get it. I know it's like a morbid curiosity, but I know I play some pretty effed up stuff. I can't watch the real stuff. She was alive? Oh shit. He said a flower bed. Oh my gosh. He's like, if only there was a flower bed. And I was like, I wonder if he's going to be able to like create a delusion to save her. Ayase wasn't getting up. I couldn't tell if her bones were crushed. I couldn't tell if her organs had ruptured. But her gray matter hadn't spurted everywhere, nor had her dark blood. There we go. He learned how to control it. That means he'll be able to get his sword soon, I'm sure. A small feeble groan escaped from Ayase's mouth. She was alive. She seemed to be unconscious and she wasn't moving, but she was alive. She was barely even injured. There was only a small drop of blood on her forehead. She had fallen from the rooftop, but there she was lying there almost completely unharmed, lying atop a flower bed. Was there always a flower bed there? I mean, oh, that's crazy. So he has kind of like had things up here in the world before, but nothing to that extent where like other people could see it as well.
我々は進化への第一歩を踏み出したんですよ。
三桁もの死人が出るなど我々は聞いておらんぞ。計画に不備があったのかね。
いいえ。
Okay, so yeah, it's like, yeah, obviously these guys are behind it somehow. Are they able to control the GE raid or something?
お二人にはぜひ人の進化の歴史というものを振り返ってみていただきたいものですね。
進化には多少の犠牲はつきものという点については異論はないよ。死人のことなどどうでもいい。重要なのは予定と違うということだ。
想定の範囲内ですよ。私の中ではね。
ならばなぜ事前に我々へ連絡せんのだ。情報をコントロールするにはそれなりの下準備が必要なのだぞ。貴様の推挙のために人や金を犠牲にしてきたわけではない。それを忘れるな。
ご安心を。先ほど申しました通り、すべては想定の範囲内。いずれ近いうちに選挙での票集めに苦労することも、強引な勧誘活動を告発される恐れもなくなるでしょう。
This is a political thing. What the hell? Momose was right.
我々が日本を、いや、世界を変える日もじきに。
Are they seeing if they can like control people so that they can have them vote for their political party?
口を慎め。300人委員会への造反が知れれば、 我らに待っているのは破滅だけだ。
Okay, Committee of 300. A secret organization shrouded in mystery, rumored to manipulate the world from behind the scenes. Composed of only 300 members, they are known as the Unseen Rulers. Their subordinates include the royalty of numerous nations, intelligence agencies, and large enterprises, with a focus on banking. They are all mere puppets of the 300, as are any secret societies that often appear in conspiracy theories. It is said almost the entire world is bent to their will, whether it be companies, police, research institutes, etc. However, their existence is only a rumor. The Committee of 300's ultimate goal is theorized to be the construction of the so-called New World Order. Hey, it's like NewGen, sorta. Under the Worldwide Human Domestication Project. Outside of the few elite, 1 billion humans will be left behind while all others are slaughtered. Those billion that survive will remain as slaves subject to the ruler's administration.
君の役目は計画通りにことを進めることであって、それ以上でも以下でもないよ。
調整は我々がやる。
承知しています。
それで第二世代についての報告を聞こうか。
お二人にも満足して
Second
いただける
generation?
仕上
Like
がりです。
NewGen, perhaps?
ノア2はね。
Noah 2. That's a lot of information to keep track of. It's a lot. I bolted away from the school as fast as I could and ran all the way to the park. Only when I felt like I was about to suffocate did I stop. My lungs were in a dire need of oxygen. As I gasped for breath, I took a quick look around the park. There was no one around. There was no one there I was afraid of. Neither Shogun nor Yua were anywhere to be seen. Relieved, I tried to catch my breath. It was almost evening. The sky's blue was slowly turning orange with the twilight. Compared to the insanity at school that had felt so unreal, this park was completely quiet, just as it always was. The incident from before had ended as a failed suicide attempt. Ayase had then been taken away in an ambulance, but I had no way of knowing what happened after that. After going through all that, I gave up on searching for Rimi and came here to the park instead. The scene from only a few minutes ago was engraved into my mind. Back then, when Ayase's body came crashing down, I'd been convinced that nothing could have saved her. But she had been saved. Didn't know how exactly, but I at least knew she wasn't dead. She had been breathing, virtually unharmed, too. Under normal circumstances, she would have absolutely died. The thing that had saved her was a total miracle. She'd fallen on top of the tender soil of a flower bed. Something that was physically impossible. It was physically impossible for Ayase to have fallen on top of a flower bed, because there hadn't been a flower bed there. Just before Ayase had fallen, the place where she was going to fall had nothing but the gray asphalt of a parking lot. A number of the Sume teachers parked there. So how had a flower bed just appeared? Had I done that? It was true that at the time I had been so frightened that I had a delusion about how a flower bed appearing below her could save her. But even then, was it really possible? Was it really possible that the delusion had become reality? So maybe he has to be in a situation where, like, of high tension for him to be able to get the D-sword. But I feel like he's been in a high tense feeling, a state for basically like the past, what, month? But like a situation where it truly does feel like life or death. Okay, let's consider it. First, I had a feeling that I might or might not have special powers. Second, there was the time Ayase had split in two, and now I had just experienced something similar to that. So creating a flower bed in an instant, how could I have achieved something that extraordinary? I didn't even have a D-sword. And on top of that, the flower bed had continued to exist even after Ayase had crashed onto it. When the teachers had rushed to check in on her on the flower bed, their footprints had been visible. Flowers blooming there, which had appeared to be the same as the ones in the courtyard, had been trampled over by the emergency services. When I looked, a number of flowers had either been flattened or had their stems completely bent. And the flower bed might have still been there in that state. A delusion had become reality, and it stayed that way. It hadn't disappeared afterward, which made it different from Ayase's other self. And everyone had accepted the idea the flower bed being there was only natural. No one even questioned it. Had I seriously done all that?
Oi!
Oh, Sena. A sharp voice called for me from behind. Before I even got the chance to turn around, a hand grabbed me by the collar. With no chance to resist, I was shoved violently against the playground equipment. I groaned in pain as my back hit the equipment hard. Well,
お前だな。
I did a positive one last time. Let's do a negative one.
あの花壇を作ったの。
It was her, Sena. She was the one tossing me around. She continued gripping my collar with tremendous strength. It grew hard to breathe. I tried to fight back by squirming and flailing around with my arms, but she refused to let go. Her eyes were filled with a sharp, murderous light. It sent a shiver down my spine. Thinking I was about to die, I shook my head in desperate denial.
とぼけるな。
I could feel Sena's breath on my cheeks. She was so close she could rip out my throat with her teeth just like that. Why was this girl so violent and terrifying?
離せ。この。
I flailed my arms around as hard as I could and inadvertently ended up smacking Sena on the cheek. The impact sent her backwards and she fell to the ground, hard. She pressed her hand against her head and looked up at me. Long gone was the endless confidence from a few moments ago. All there was now was fear. Her eyes were moist. The sight of this never-before-seen vulnerability lit a sadistic fire in me like no other. Oh shit, because he did say something like, I want to kill someone. All the frustration that had been building inside me had at last found a way to escape, and now it could all flow out at once.
僕を舐めるな。
My words were undeniably aggressive. They were words I would normally never use, but I'd said them to her. And it felt good, refreshing even.
悪かった。でも、叩くなんてひどいだろ。
Sena looked like she was about to cry, something that only fueled me even more. The way she was slumped down on the floor. Oh god. The way her skirt was hiked farther up her legs, exposing more of her thigh skin than could normally be seen. The way her long black hair flowed down and spilled outward on the ground. All of it aroused me. All of it. Ugh. Why do I have to be such a
やられて
degenerate?
ばかりだと思ったのか。確かに見た目明らかに弱そうだもんな、僕は。明らかなドキュンを相手にするより、僕みたいな弱そうなやつをいじめる方が楽だし、楽しいだろう。調子に乗りやがって。僕だって、やるときはやるんだぞ、このビッチが。いつまでも、黙ってばかりだと思うなよ。
I couldn't stop the rage swelling inside me. I wanted to mess this arrogant slut up even more. Oh my gosh. What would have happened if I had chosen the positive one instead? But yeah, I'm wondering, like, now that he has these powers, can I choose whether to make him either try and use them for good, or is he gonna just devolve into basically like, oh, I've been bullied my whole life and now I have this power and I'm gonna use it to get back at people? I got on top of Sena, who was still lying on the ground.
何を。うるさい。
I grabbed both her wrists, pinning her down. Having locked her in place, she looked up at me from directly beneath me. Until now, she'd always been looking down on me. Well, who's looking down on who now, bitch? This feeling of superiority made me almost dizzy.
やめろよ。離せ。
Her phrasing was as blunt as ever, but her voice lacked any actual power. Was she crying? Well, she was no match for me, a man in terms of pure strength. What else could she do?
頼む。こんなこと。やめろ。お願い。
I couldn't hold back my laughter. Now I was the one in control. I could do whatever I wanted with her. I never knew there existed such a wonderful world. Why had I never done this before? What had I been afraid of? I've been a fool for keeping a fruit so sweet locked away for so long.
たっぷり可愛がってやるよ。
Jesus. I know this is just a delusion, but still. I want her to smack him in the face for even thinking that. When I returned to my senses, instead of being on top of Sena, she was still grabbing me by the chest and pushing me against the playground equipment. And now he just goes back to just like retreating into himself like a corn cob. I was somewhat confused about how the tables had suddenly turned.
その力のことを誰に教わったんだって聞いているんだ。
I didn't remember her asking anything like that. Maybe that scenario from earlier was just a delusion I'd used to escape reality. Maybe. Despite me still trying to wrap my head around the situation, Sena started shaking me violently.
誰からだ、答えろ。天聖信仰会とは関係あるのか、ない
Oh
のか。
my gosh. Oh god, now we've got the Cosmic Church of the Divine Light. There's like the Black Knights, the Greater Will. It's too much to keep hold of, or like just keep it all in my head. The Cosmic Church of Divine Light, fictional, a newly founded religion, inaugurated in 1930. Their public estimate places the number of followers at around 5 million, but the actual number is thought to be closer to 2 million. Its members are characterized by their ardent, forceful proselytization, which often causes repeated trouble for anyone involved. Kuromochi Yudai, the second generational founder, possesses absolute charisma, and in return his followers offer absolute reverence. Divine Church of the what now? I shook my head reflexively. I can't breathe. You're choking me. I'm gonna pass out. I'm gonna die. I'm done for. Just before I lost consciousness, Sena suddenly let go of me and I collapsed to the ground. I kept on coughing, struggling desperately to get oxygen in my lungs. Contrary to the delusion I just had, I was in a hopeless situation. Was Sena my enemy after all? Was she another one of Shogun's underlings? If she was, then I had to run away.
関係ないならいい。悪かった。
Noticing my confusion, Sena clicked her tongue lightly, then let out a sigh. And then, without saying another word, she went to leave. Guess she wasn't going to hurt me. Then... Mustering up all my courage, I called after her. I'd expected her to ignore me, but instead she stopped and turned around. Her expression remained stern, but she still looked like she was willing to listen to what I had to say.
力って、何なの?
Sena knew something. She'd asked me if I created the flower bed from before. Everyone but me had recognized the flower bed as something that had always been there, but that didn't seem to apply to Sena.
さっきの花壇、どうなって。
お前が妄想したんだろ。
A delusion? I had, but...
妄想は現実にすることが可能だ。本当じゃないものが景色に紛れ込む。つまり、エラーを現実として認識させる。
Okay, so her thing with the sword, I'm guessing that is an error, but other people don't notice it except for people who have the power as well. But things like the flower bed, people just assume that that's always been there.
でも、視界に映すだけじゃ、それって、幻でしかないよ。
But didn't she say something about like you can trick all of the senses, right? Illusions were nothing more than that. Illusions, fake stuff you perceive as real. If that flower bed had just been an illusion, then Aise shouldn't have survived. The only way Aise would have been saved was if the flower bed hadn't been an illusion, but entirely real.
世界の仕組みは3つの数字で全て説明できる。0と1、そしてマイナス1。ディソードはそのマイナス1を生み出すためのショートカットになる。だがお前はディソードなしでそれをやった。
There she goes again, more incomprehensible garbage. Wait, but I realized that what Sena was telling me wasn't just some schizo shit she'd come up with. The VR technology patent did exist after all, so that at least wasn't BS. Sena definitely knew things I didn't.
いいか、これ以上エラーを作るな。それがお前のためだ。それと、他にもエラーを見たら教えろ。
Without letting me even get a word in, Sena blasted me with thing after thing, most of which sounded like threats, and then when she was finally done, she turned her back to me.
目に見えるものだけを信じられることが、どんなに幸せか。
After spitting out one last murmur this time, Sena finally left the park. Okay, back at the hospital. The floor of the AH Tokyo General Hospital that housed the psychiatric ward was engulfed in silence. Ever since the earthquake had struck, the emergency room and surgical ward had been faced with a difficult situation. Injured citizens who had lost consciousness due to unexplained symptoms were being carried into the clinic one after the other. The psychiatric ward, meanwhile, was not nearly as involved in the relief efforts, nor were the outpatients facilities, allowing the latter department to conclude its operations even earlier than usual. Over the last few days, patients suffering from PTSD had come pouring in, but at least for today, the psychiatric ward had finished all of its outpatient appointments. A nurse there, Hazuki Shino, realized she'd been working non-stop ever since her shift began the night before, and that she had hardly even taken a break. This obviously left her feeling quite exhausted, and of course, hungry. A psychiatric ward had recently lost one of its doctors in the NewGen incident, and the person replacing him had yet to arrive, leaving them constantly understaffed. However, despite the shortage, all that remained for today's work were some minor chores that Hazuki could pass off to the next nurse, allowing her to take some time off. Reassuring herself she only had to persevere for a little bit longer, Hazuki slapped her cheeks with both hands and began to walk through the empty lobby, only to suddenly feel a gaze on her back. Oh, here we go, another one. Chills ran down the nape of her neck. Goosebumps rose across her skin. She reflexively looked behind her, but all she saw was a silent corridor. Not a soul was there. Hazuki jumped in surprise. She had heard a voice come from an entirely different direction. The origin of the voice was a single man standing in the lobby, which Hazuki had been convinced was empty. He had called out to her the moment he first saw her. "Hey, Sua!" He was a fairly young man and appeared quite virile. His complexion was nearly faultless, and he looked just as, if not more healthy.
あなたは。
ちょっと時間もらっていいっすか。
はあ。
どうもっす。
He smiled awkwardly, abruptly grabbed Hazuki's arm and started walking her from the lobby toward the stairs. Hazuki, still quite bewildered, watched as the man, Suwa Mamoru, took out a black ID badge from his pocket and humbly held it out to her. It was a police badge. Stopping at the landing of the staircase, Suwa looked around carefully. He seemed to be very concerned with his surroundings.
それで、お話って。
Still having quite a bit of work left to do, Hazuki was feeling slightly restless, something Suwa seemed to understand implicitly. And then, without any form of introduction, Suwa produced a photo from his pocket. I'm guessing it's a picture of Takumi.
この少年に見覚えないっすか。
Depicted in the photo was the apathetic face of Nishijo Takumi. Hazuki, confident in her ability to recognize faces due to her profession, nodded her head.
西條匠。間違いないっすか。
ええ。でも。
Hazuki's hesitation was only natural. Leaking a patient's private information could only spell trouble, even if it was to the police. But this was something Suwa had been aware of prior to speaking with Hazuki. Suddenly, Sua's light attitude he had been displaying up until that moment shifted to a far more serious one, and he began to speak in a low voice.
頼みがあるんすけど、西條匠のカルテ、こっそり見せてもらえないっすか。
え、そんなの無理です。できません。
とある事件に関わる重要なことなんすよ。
Now at a complete loss for words, Hazuki tried to leave, but Suwa circled around her and blocked her path.
困ります。
迷惑はかけないっす。だから頼ませよ。
As a last resort, Suwa got down on his knees.
やめてください。本当に無理なんです。
これ以上犠牲者を出さないためにも。
Hazuki had no idea what she could do to make him give up. Unable to think of any proper way to say no, Hazuki could do nothing but stammer. I was in a bit of a daze after Sena left, but I quickly shook myself out of it and dashed all the way back to my base. Luckily, I hadn't been confronted by Shogun or Yua on the way. In the end, I'd come back home without finding Rimi. With all the insanity caused by Ayase and the earthquake, the school would probably let everyone go home early. So maybe if I waited a bit, Rimi would show up. In the meantime, though, I'd just have to suck it up and deal with my own fear, alone. To distract myself from my growing anxiety, I went to try and gather information on my freshly restored PC. Right as I thought that, notification light on my phone, which I had set right next to my monitor, started blinking. When I opened it, I saw I had received a text. I thought it was Remy trying to contact me, but when I opened it... Oh, I was just thinking, I was like, yeah, it's been a while since he's heard from his sister. Okay. Oh my, OMG, it's Nomi. Gotta tell you about school today. Something crazy happened at school today. There was a suicide attempt. It was so freaky. I haven't been that scared in a while. I hope she's okay. Were you at school when it all went down, big bro? And wow, the earthquake was crazy too. It gave me a really, really, really bad headache though. What was that all about? So she kind of enjoyed being part of the spectators, huh? That's not fucked up at all. Naturally, I didn't send a reply. I searched online for information on ISA. Phantasm's official homepage was still down, and none of the newspapers had reported on her either. Well, I guess they had their hands full with the earthquake, so they couldn't really spend the time reporting on some random indie singer's suicide attempt. Where things were now, I had no way of figuring out exactly how ISA was doing, so I switched topics. There was way more information on the earthquake than when I had checked earlier. Apparently, the death count had risen to 118, and the injured went above 300. Wow, I never thought the fatalities would go beyond 100. The epicenter was Shibuya, and it seemed the damage hadn't spread outside of it. It had been a seismic intensity 5 quake. According to one article, most of the magnetic media within Shibuya had been destroyed. When I thought about how I wasn't the only one to experience such tragedy, it made my frustration erupt all over again. It was a true, undeniable tragedy. My treasured Moe pics and Eroge save data. They would never come back. That aside, I couldn't help but feel that this was no normal earthquake. 118 people dying wasn't normal. And of course, that abnormality had grown into a hot topic of discussion online. Jesus Christ, how are they all such uncaring assholes? Wait, you guys think the earthquake was caused by the whose eyes are those eyes guy too? The only reason that he's concerned about, like, he's saying that they're assholes is because of the whose eyes are those eyes. Like, he was the one who was going on about how his Eroge and his Moe pics. He seemed almost more upset about that than the fact that a bunch of people died. I tried to think back to what had happened during the earthquake. First, I'd been hit by a tremendous impact. My head had felt like it was boiling, exploding even, a sensation I'd never experienced before. Getting hit by something that bad, dying from shock, wouldn't be all that surprising. Telling myself I shouldn't stick to just the internet, I decided to watch some news on TV as well. Oh, so they're saying that maybe, or is he saying that maybe people died from the head trauma or the headache rather than actually anything related to the earthquake? My PC had a TV tuner attached to it, so that was why I didn't have nor need an actual TV.
現在までに死者118名、重軽傷者300名以上と非常に多くの犠牲者が出ていることが分かっています。さて、渋谷の駅前と中継がつながったようです。島谷さん、現地の様子はいかがですか
？2005年に同じように震度5の地震が東京であったんですよ。その時はゼロで、なぜ今回は100名以上の被害者が出ているんですか？
被害者の数は震度に比例するわけじゃないんです。そこには様々な要因がありまして、亡くなった方の死因や病院に運ばれた負傷者の容体については未だ詳しい情報が入っておりません。
Exactly, so they're not saying it was necessarily like people that were trapped in debris or hit by debris. It could be the whole thing with their head.
また渋谷区を中心に磁気メディアが全壊してしまっていることについて今日は専門家にお越しいただいております。
And they keep saying, yeah, magnetic media, right? The whole thing about like the magnets or whatever Bond was like using to check the GE rate.
地質学産業研究所より林原泰造先生、財団法人地質調査環境センターより小沢幹人先生にお越しいただきました。
林原さん、今回の地震について磁気メディアに深刻な被害が出た原因というのはどういうところにあるんでしょうか？
まず知っておいていただきたいのは、渋谷区あたりの地下200メートル付近には磁鉄鉱、つまり天然の磁石が多く埋蔵されている地層があるということですね。地層の分類としては火成岩層ですが、私たちはこのエリアを磁鉄鉱の谷、マグネタイトバレーと呼んでいます。地中にある磁石の谷ですね。 文字通りかなり大規模な岩脈なんですよ。ここにですね、今回の地震のような大きな刺激が加わったとするならば、その影響で地上に存在する自生体、主に磁気メディアの持つ記録部に、致命的なダメージを与えてもおかしくはないんです。
何をバカな。
小沢先生は別の意見ですか？
確かに渋谷の地下には巨大なマグネタイトの岩脈があることは事実です。ですが、磁石と呼ぶにはあまりにも微弱なこのマグネタイト群にはですね、地上の磁気モーメントや安定磁場を崩すほどの力はないというのが通説になっています。実際ですね、過去にも震度5の地震は何度も発生しています。過去のそれらの地震では今回のような被害はなかった。なので、原因は別にあるのではないかと考えるのが妥当だと思います。
そうは言うがね、今回の異常な犠牲者数については、ただの地震では片付けられない何かがあるのが事実なわけであり、渋谷にいた人のほとんどが頭痛がしたって訴えていることからも、間違いなく自鉄鋼が関係している可能性が。
地場ごときで100人も殺せると主張するおつもりですか？
それではここで CM です。
結局詳しいことは何もわからずか。
Right after the earthquake, there had been a huge white mist floating above Shibuya. It turned the sky completely white, and yet it hadn't even been mentioned on the news. When the information had been fresh, everyone made sure to report on it. But now they were acting like it had never happened. Something about that just felt wrong. The off-hours entrance to AH Tokyo General Hospital featured an area where ambulances could pull up alongside the building in order to deliver emergency patients. 2 ambulances were currently parked there, and paramedics were carrying those injured during the earthquake into the hospital. A doctor wearing light green surgical scrubs and the middle-aged head nurse accompanying him were loudly directing the paramedics through the process. The area around the off-hours entrance was already lined with patients waiting to receive treatment, the sheer number of which indicating how busy the doctors truly were. There were 2 types of patients getting carried into the hospital. First, the ones suffering from physical trauma, patients who'd come with blood flowing from their arms, legs, and foreheads, their faces contorted in pain. While their state made them difficult to look upon, their treatment had been relegated to a lower priority. The other type was those who were unconscious despite showing no signs of physical trauma. These patients were prioritized. The number of unconscious people were awfully high among the emergency patients brought in from this particular earthquake. Such a high number had not been observed following the previous major earthquakes. It was an entirely new phenomenon. Moreover, the doctors were unable to explain the reason why so many of them had fallen unconscious. Another ambulance arrived at the hospital, its siren blaring loudly. When the emergency responders disembarked from the ambulance, a doctor asked the patient's condition, and a paramedic immediately responded with, "Ooh, top priority." That was all it took. In a normal situation, the doctor would have protested, asked for more information. Such an unprecedented, chaotic situation, one would have expected that just shouting top priority would be answered by a succinct, "You don't say." And yet, surprisingly, both the doctor and the head nurse merely gave a light nod and proceeded to help unload the stretcher from the ambulance. Okay, that squeak, that sounded like a wheelchair, didn't it? The person lying on the stretcher was Kishimoto Ayase. She was unconscious, yet faint moans escaped her lips. Paying no mind to the resentful gazes of the injured patient sitting amongst the entrance, the doctor and paramedics hurriedly carried the stretcher inside the hospital. And Rimi. What are you doing there, Rimi? A girl stood at the hospital's main entrance, observing the situation from a distance. Sakihata Rimi's eyebrows furrowed atop her stern expression. Her teeth sank into her lips.
Kishimoto-san.
Obviously, I was concerned about the earthquake, but Shogun was way more of an issue to me. I couldn't get him out of my head. And speaking of, my headache was more or less gone, but anxiety had already swooped right in to replace it, as did the depression that came with being alone. I still hadn't heard from Rimi. I tried to call her myself, but had gone straight to voicemail. Up until now, Rimi had always come dashing in to rescue me, to tell me everything would be fine. So of all days for her not to do that, why today? Hadn't she told me she would always stay by my side? I gritted my teeth, and then, as a way to escape my anxiety, I decided to focus entirely on reconfiguring my PC. First things first, I needed to fix the settings on my email software. It had been forever since I'd first set it up, so I couldn't remember how exactly to do it. So the first thing I had to do was find the instruction manual that had been included with the email software provided by my ISP. Despite not putting in much actual physical work, I found myself drenched in sweat. I'd nearly given up out of frustration multiple times throughout the process. It had ended up eating a full hour of my time, half of which was spent trying to find the damn manual, just to recover my email address. Well, now that I had it back, I should check it right away. Ooh, are we getting an email from Yua, maybe?
メールだよボケナス
Oh, whose eyes are those eyes? From Nanami. Ah, I could finally hear that voice again. I felt so relieved. All the pain and suffering had all been worth it. I had 8 new emails, all of which were spam. Well, except for Nanami. I love how he considers her spam. Actually, hidden among the spam was an email with a strange subject line and an even stranger sender. I groaned reflexively. What the hell? Was Nanami trying to prank me? If she was, then it was a pretty shitty thing to do. I genuinely wanted to punch her in the face. No, wait a minute. There was no reason for me to get an email from Nanami. She had never contacted me using my computer's email address before. She'd always just texted me on my phone like she had earlier. And not only that, but I'd never even given her my email address. Was it just a coincidence? A fluke? Nanami was a common first name after all, and the phrase "whose eyes are those eyes" had become so popular, pretty much everyone was using it. There was nothing strange about it being used as a subject for a spam email. Just to soothe my anxiety, I decided to check the contents.
結構な長文だな。さっきはチャットで話ができて楽しかったよ。ちなみに送信者の名前はダミー。
It says Shogun.
僕の名前は将軍だよ。
Yep. Shogun? No, it couldn't be.
将軍が僕のメアド知ってるはずが。
Wait, what if Shogun had read my mind? If he'd done that, figuring out my email address would be child's play.
嘘でしょ。
I'm glad ISA Sana's safe. I initially planned to paint her as the next victim of my NewGen canvas, but suicide works too. You've outdone yourself, Takumi-kun. You got a new high score. Very impressed. You really are something special. Whoa, what the hell? But enough about that stuff. Let's talk about Nishiju Nanami-chan. The two of you are siblings, so I'd love to see some juicy drama unfold between you two. Ever since the earthquake hit, Shibuya's been pretty bloodthirsty. Whether we can reach a conclusion so touching, it'll blast away all that in an instant. That's up to you. As I read the email, seeing how friendly he was acting toward me only served to creep me out even more. This guy was insane. Why would he... It's real hard to clear quests unarmed, isn't it? You're a hero, so don't you feel like you deserve a legendary sword to match? I know you do, so I hope you're looking forward to what I've got in store for you. At 9 p.m. tonight, I want you to come to the roof of O-Front. You're going to be on TV, so make sure you put on a heroic tunic. Now then, let the quest to rescue Nanami begin. Oh, he was talking about quests and high scores like it was some kind of game. Ooh, P.S. before I forget, did you get my present?
僕が勇者なんかじゃない。ナイトハルトじゃない。
He was planning to finally kill me. I couldn't go. There was no way I could go. I wanted to run away. Rimi, I need you to protect me. Why wasn't she answering me when I tried to contact her? Maybe she'd been injured in the earthquake? But back when I'd seen Misumi-kun, he didn't mention anything happening to her. I picked up my phone and checked if I'd gotten any calls or texts from Rimi. Rimi, where did you... Right as I thought that, something stopped me. It was my texts. At the top of the list, I could see the text Nomi had sent me earlier. Was Nomi okay? I read Shogun's email again from top to bottom. But enough about that stuff. Let's talk about Nishijo Nomi-chan. Now then, let the quest to rescue Nomi begin. What was that supposed to mean? Forget that. I should just call Nomi. I opened the address book on my phone. Only 3 numbers were registered there. Rimi's, Nonomi's, and the number for my parents' house. Nomi was always nagging me to call her. Every time we saw each other, she'd bug me about it. Well, since she'd asked so many times, I guess I could throw her a bone. So please answer. If you don't, I'm never calling you again. I swear to God, if you got injured during the earthquake and aren't answering because of it, I'll never let you hear the end of it. I selected Nonomi's number and pressed the call button. I put the phone to my ear. I heard nothing. The ringing tone didn't start immediately. It was normal for my phone to take a second whenever I called with it, but right now that 1 second of silence felt like an eternity. I was getting increasingly antsy.
早くしてよ。よし、繋がった。
I wonder if Shogun's gonna answer. Oh. What? That sound. What was that sound? Wait, is that Nonomi's cell phone? Does he have the cell phone somehow? Is that the present? Does he have Nonomi's phone on him right now? I pulled my phone away from my ear. It's still dialing, right? That's gotta be her ringtone. An unfamiliar melody echoed throughout the room. Could it be a ringtone? Because she was talking about her ringtones before, wasn't she? About, like, selecting one. Whose phone was ringing? Alright, let's do positive. But with the timing, what else could it be? I shook my head. I had never heard Nonomi's ringtone, so there was no proof the melody I was hearing was it. No proof at all. I was getting scared now. I pressed my phone back to my ear. Nomi still wasn't answering. Please pick up. Pick up the phone already. Oh, she picked up.
ななみでしょ。返事しろよ。今どこにいるんだ。大丈夫なの。何か言って。ななみ。
実は。
Huh? What the? Something weird was going on. It was almost like I was hearing Nomi just through the phone, but from somewhere really close by, too.
お前、一体どこにいるんだ。上。
My gaze wandered upward. Something was moving on top of my bed. A person. Someone was wriggling around up there, and because of how little space they had, eroge cases crumbled to the floor as they did. Don't tell me.
そこにいるの。
見つかっちゃった。
My guess had been right. Nomi peeked out from atop the bed with an apologetic look on her face. Had she just been hiding this whole time? But since when?
何が手だよ。それより車椅子の怪しいやつに会わなかったか。
As she got off the bed, I examined her from top to bottom to see if she was hurt anywhere.
鬼、ちょっと落ち着いてってば。
聞いてるんだ。答えろよ。お前、本当に大丈夫なのか。
それって将軍のことだよね。
まさかあったのか。どこで何をされた。
I grabbed Nomi by the shoulders despite pressing her, or desperately pressing her for an answer. Jesus Christ, yes, Nomi could be a huge brat, but if Shogun had defiled her, it'd be all my fault. Shogun had put his hands on her as a means to provoke me. To him, she was just collateral damage. I was so ashamed I started to cry. I was causing problems not just for myself, but for those around me. Hey, look at him actually showing concern. Harmless otaku, my ass. I was a failure, not just as a brother, but as a human being. I was scum, complete and utter scum.
鬼、泣いてるの？もしかして、ナナのことを心配してくれてる？
ごめん、僕のせいで。
泣かないでよ。困ったな。実は、あの将軍のメール、7のいたずら、なんだ。
And he's like, I hate you, dumb bitch. I couldn't process what she had said. I was stunned.
つまり、将軍って7だったの。最初からずっと。お兄があまりにも7の相手してくれないから、ちょっとからかうつもりで。
No way.
つい。
I don't believe that.
だから
No,
ね、
this is a delusion.
7は誰にも何にもされてないし、全くピンピンしてるよ。お兄が泣くことなんてないの。わかった？
お前。
I was relieved. Upon learning that she deceived me, the release of all my tension and fear made me cry even harder. I couldn't believe she'd do that to me, and I was pretty upset that she'd been screwing with me for so long. But none of that mattered right now.
ふざけんなよ。
ごめん。本当にごめんね、お兄。差し入れ持ってきたから、それで許して。
I was just thinking, like, I hope you like the present I brought you. She held her hands together as if in prayer. She apologized to me, and then she cheerfully took out a paper box that had been hidden in the corner. This is a delusion. This isn't happening. This isn't real. Inside the box were 4 tiny cakes, 2 Mont Blancs, and 2 cheesecakes.
どう？美味しそうでしょ？まあ、当然だよね。ナナの手作りだもん。お兄のために作ったんだからね。
Of course, like, this is the positive delusion. This is what he wants to have it be. Is it's all just a prank.
ほら、一緒に食べよう。
Nomi put the box on my desk, then placed 2 cakes each on 2 different paper plates that she'd set out. No idea where they'd come from, though.
ねえ、お兄。ナナのこと、心配してくれてありがとう。すごく嬉しかった。お兄にもいいところあるじゃん。泣いちゃったのはちょっと情けなかったけどね。
Shut your mouth, you lying, backstabbing bitch. I knew he'd say something like that. My pride had been torn to shreds. I'd been deceived, betrayed, and I'd even ended up crying. I couldn't believe how pathetic I was, how stupid I was.
でも、お兄がナナのお兄でよかった。
She smiled at me happily. It was a more peaceful sight than I was used to. How nice would it be if that was what actually happened? Yeah, that was nothing more than just an overly convenient, easy-to-swallow delusion of mine. Nomi still hadn't picked up, and the sound of someone's ringtone continued to echo throughout the room. The melody was a happy-go-lucky one, something that was in harsh contrast to my current state of mind. The sense of dread within me was growing. There was no getting around it. Nonomi's phone was in this room. I couldn't think of any other explanation. I couldn't divert my eyes from reality anymore. So he said about the present, he got that... Oh, that's crazy, because he said that present thing, was that... That was after the earthquake, right? But she had sent him the text about the earthquake, so she would have been at school. I'm so confused right now. P.S. Before I forget, did you get my present? Yeah, that's right, because yeah, it happened after the earthquake, because that's when Rimi apparently came in, except she didn't. It wasn't happening, it couldn't be, it didn't matter how much sense it made, it just couldn't be true. I slowly lowered the hand holding my phone. I couldn't even blink, my throat was dry as a desert. Even still, I searched for the source of the sound. This time I slowly, ever so slowly, examined each and every object scattered throughout the room. So if that's the case, then he would have had to somehow put that phone in his room at some point when he wasn't there, and that was way before the earthquake even happened, and then he got the text from Nomi asking about, like, if he was there. I hated myself more than ever for not cleaning my room. If only I was more organized, I could have spotted where it was coming from immediately. Where the hell was it coming from? Oh shit. This is all just a big ploy to get Takumi to clean his room. The box. The song was coming from inside of it. It was the size of about 2 eroge cases. At first I thought it was something I'd bought online, but there was nothing printed on it. There wasn't a shipping label either. It was sealed with duct tape. Had this large box always been here? Had it fallen from the bed during the earthquake?
Yeah.
I guess if this Shogun person can also somehow create delusions and place it into his room, it couldn't have. I'd never seen it before. If it was something I'd bought online, I would have opened it straight away. it was something I had sold and was shipping to someone else, I'd sent it off the moment I sealed it up. For a second I considered maybe Nomi had dropped it off, but I couldn't remember her bringing a cardboard box of this size. Which could only mean, during the hour I'd been at school, oh, someone had entered my base. But wasn't Shogun talking about oh, did he say I have a present for you? The present hadn't been delivered yet, right? Okay, that explains it. I have a present for you. I hope it pleases you. That's right, that's right. My heart was beating out of my chest. In a panic, I went to check the lock on my door. A chill ran down my spine. Earlier in the day, when I'd wandered outside my base, I didn't remember locking the door. And I couldn't blame myself. At the time, I'd been suffering from a stabbing headache, and I was really dizzy. When I'd come back from school an hour later, I hadn't locked the door then either. Anyone could have easily gotten in. Was it Shogun? Had Shogun really broken in? I looked at the box again. The song was still playing. Nanami's phone was in there. I nervously lifted the cardboard box. It was heavy. With how heavy it was, there was no way it was just a phone inside. It weighed about the same as 500 milliliters of soda. I was hesitant to open it. I had a very bad feeling about this. But there was nothing else I could do. I had to open it. I was too worried about Nomi. She was a total brat, but at the end of the day, she was still my little sister. Nanami's phone was in the box. In other words, someone had taken her phone from her. Now then, let the quest to rescue Nomi begin. That had been in Shogun's email. I wonder, he said, like, you're gonna need a tunic. I wonder if there's, like, a tunic in there. Something for him to wear. I looked at the clock. It was already past 7:30 p.m. Nomi might be in danger. I had no choice but to open it. My heart refused to stop pounding. Large drops of sweat began trickling down my forehead. With a moan, I wiped away the sweat with the back of my hand, and then I slowly tore off the shoddily applied duct tape. Mumbling that like a prayer, I opened the box. Inside was a lump of aluminum foil packed carefully with cushioning material. I peeked fearfully inside the box, but the phone was nowhere to be seen. The song was coming from inside the foil. Sweat got on my eyes and it stung. Before I knew it, my entire body had gotten soaked in sweat. No, I can't do this anymore. Why me? Why does it have to be me? I nearly said those tearful complaints aloud. I pleaded with Seraton for comfort, but she didn't say anything. A myriad of delusions swirled within my head, so much that it felt like it was on the verge of exploding. I couldn't even focus hard enough to have a delusional conversation with Seraton. My mind was racing so fast I couldn't even think straight. And yet, despite the near shutdown of my brain, the happy-go-lucky melody from the phone just kept on assaulting me relentlessly. Having made up my mind, I pinched the edges of the aluminum foil with my fingers. Closed my eyes, held my breath, and tore off the aluminum foil in one go. I could hear the song even more clearly than before. I was too afraid to open my eyes. I tried as hard as I could to catch my breath, but to no avail. It was fine. Everything was fine. There was nothing to be afraid of. It was just a harmless prank from Nomi. Just wait. Any second now, Nomi was going to burst into the room with a big smile on her face, yelling, "Surprise! I got you." I was sure of it. There was no reason to even consider anything else. Once she did that, I'd lay into her like never before, and I'd never talk to her ever again. Go on, Nomi. Prove me right. I had to open my eyes. I couldn't keep staring at the darkness. Not looking at it was only making things worse. All it did was force me to imagine what horrors might be inside. I couldn't handle any more terrifying delusions. And so, I slowly opened my eyes and saw it. Whoa! Oh! No! Oh, the bracelet. The bracelet. Oh, I did not expect that. I did not expect that. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I knew that bracelet was going to come back in some way, but not like this. I thought it was going to be something different. Lying in the foil was a hand, a cleanly severed, slender hand. Grasped in that hand was a phone identical to mine, and wrapped around its wrist was...
へえ、かわいいバングルじゃん。じゃあさ、これナナにちょうだい。
Oh, take it off your hands. And then her hand got taken
おに
off.
どう？似合う？
A yellow leather band that had turned crimson. A bangle. Damn. So what can I say about that episode? That was wild. I feel like in terms of shocking moments, like this one had the most so far. Yeah, I would say the most shocking thing would be Takumi actually learning. Well, he doesn't know how to use his delusions still. He just managed to have something appear and stay there in reality. So there was the hint about the D-sword, what Sena said. And that would be the thing I would talk about, except for that whole thing at the end. What the fuck? With, like, Shogun actually reaching out to Takumi, knowing where he lives, knowing his email, leaving the present, and saying that he has to appear at the rooftop of some place to save his sister, who is obviously... I mean, unless he managed to find a random other arm with that bangle and cut it off, we have to assume his sister's not doing well right now. And then the whole thing with like the earthquake, just a lot, just a whole bunch happened in this episode. I don't even know where to start, but yeah, I am very intrigued to see what happens next. Like, he is actually going to have to meet Shogun, I assume, at the top of this place, dressed like a hero, being a hero, trying to save his sister. Will Takumi actually do something selfless and, save his sister? I assume now, I feel like this is a turning point now where he actually has to do something. He has to get out of his shell. He has to do something for somebody else instead of just worrying about himself. I assume that he's going to have to learn very quickly how to get that D-sword in order to save Nanami. Yeah, I can't wait to see what happens in the next episode. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this shocking episode, and stay tuned next week for part 12. Until then, bye guys. Special shoutouts to my top tier patrons: Revealing Storm, Lynn's VA, Kenju Storm, and iCognito.